Good afternoon to you. 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news coming up. John Lott joins us from the Crime Prevention Research Center. He's out with some important new data about the actual status of crime in our country. It's not just your senses. The data support this. Things are out of control. And then Mary Rook will be here at 5 o'clock from the Daily Caller. We talked to him about the lady vote. Where's it going this election? Who are they going to support? Who are the girls for? We'll get to the bottom of that and what President Trump might do to shore up some support there. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You know, on that front, how President Trump is doing with men and with women. Have you noticed that men are a big part of the conversation right now? For the first time in many elections, does anybody even give a crap about men? It's causing Kamala a lot of agita. She's not doing well with men of almost any race, actually. Black men are fleeing her in droves. Hispanic men very much fleeing her. White men are very much against her. It's just men broadly are like, no, I'm not supporting you. And, of course, the left is saying that's because those men are sexist. That's the allegation. You're a bigot for not supporting her. You have to support her because she's a woman. That's your obligation. And a lot of men are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. She's shallow. She's not presenting a good vision. I don't think she'll be a good leader. They have all sorts of rational reasons why they oppose her. And over on CNN, they have one of their data guys, Harry Enten. He's going through the numbers. And I found this kind of fascinating, very fascinating, because there's a lot of conversation around the fact that President Trump is underperforming with suburban college-educated white women. That's the big thing they always tell us, that they're not on his side. They don't like him. They oppose him. They say the reason for that in many cases is that they're more enthusiastically pro-abortion, and they think that Kamala Harris would be the vehicle to advance that. And here's what CNN's Harry Enten had to say that gave me some encouragement, actually. It turns out women, by and large, are kind of staying in the same place when it comes, as they have historically, when it comes to who they vote for. Men are dramatically moving towards Trump. Listen.
Let's just talk about where male voters stand right now. This is the Democrat versus Trump margin. Compare 4 years ago, Trump won among male voters by just 5 points. Look at where we stand today. My goodness gracious, Donald Trump doing considerably better among male voters, up by 12 points. That's a 7-point swing in Donald Trump's direction. Keep in mind that 7-point swing, because I want you to take a look at what's going on with female voters, all right? What do you see here? There is no swing. Nothing's going on. There is no change from where we were 4 years ago, right? Biden versus Trump. Biden won him by 13. Look where Harris leads in the polls right now, by 13. The idea that women would be supporting a Democrat isn't so surprising, while men would be supporting a Republican, again, not surprising. But the fact that we've seen this movement among male voters, and there's been no movement whatsoever among female voters, that, my friends, is quite surprising. It's something, honestly, I wasn't really expecting until I actually looked at the numbers, which is, I guess, why you have me on.
Isn't that fascinating? I don't know about you, but in the world of talking to Republican voters, conservative people who are Trump supporters, this issue comes up all the time. Everyone kind of gets nervous as they talk about it. Well, if you drill down into the data, what's going on with women? How does Trump recover with them? And Trump's making all sorts of ovations to women, including this event that he did today on Fox, again, recorded yesterday, aired today on Fox in Georgia. It's an entire town hall of women voters who, I should point out, were all enthusiastic Trump supporters. That was abundantly clear as the town hall began. As Harris Faulkner says, I'd like to introduce the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. The crowd went wild. Just women were shrieking like Oprah was giving away cars. It was hilarious. And I was like, oh, man, I know how this is going to go. And, of course, they loved him. They loved Trump. But that's an interesting data point. So as you're talking to your friends and your family about this, that really stands out to me, that the movement among women is non-existent. They're in the same place, based on the polling, the same place that they were when Biden was running in 2020. But what has changed dramatically is that men are sick of the crap. They're done. They're not interested. No more with this Democrat stuff. And they're much more aligned with President Trump. So that's a fascinating detail. Speaking of CNN, I love how they fire people on CNN and like they throw them away like a boomerang and then they come swinging back every so often, you know? Like, what's the potato head guy? Brian Stelter. That's right. Brian Stelter. He came back. You know, he swung back to CNN. Don Lemon, they tossed him away. They said, we're done with you. They got rid of him. He comes flying back to appear on the TV every so often, right? These boomerangs. And here's Don Lemon on CNN just in the last 24 hours saying that he did all these man on the streets and he was talking to people and everybody's voting for Trump that he's talking. He goes, this wasn't even contrived. I just talked to people. They're voting for Trump. And he said he had to lecture black men about their support for Trump and why they need to stop doing that.
Yes. You're talking to a lot of voters. And I will just say that you texted me right around the Democratic convention and you said, I am talking to people and Kamala Harris has a problem with black men.
Yeah. And I told the campaign I did not hear from them. I mean, who am I for them to get back to me? But there's a problem.
So what kind of, this guy's not a journalist. So he claims he's on the street. Everybody he's talking to, his anecdotal evidence is that all the black men that he's speaking to are voting for Trump. I'm voting for Trump. And he's like, what? I have to tell the Kamala campaign. He contacts this unemployed dude, contacts the Kamala campaign. And he's like, you have to know, black men are supporting Trump. And then they didn't respond to him. They didn't respond to him. Now, you heard Don just say there, he's like, well, who am I that they would respond to me? And I love how he's pretending to be self-effacing. He's like, I'm just Don Lemon. Like, why would anybody contact me? But you know for a fact that he's been angry about this. That's why he said it on CNN. He's ticked off. Don't you know who I am? I am Don Lemon. And get it right, Don Lemon. I told them they were losing black men. They should have listened to me. They should have listened to me. So here's Don on CNN explaining what's going on and how he had to, each of these black men that he spoke with, he had to correct them and tell them why they were so wrong.
To get back to me, but there's a problem. And look, I went from battleground state to battleground state. When they invited me to the convention, I didn't just want to fly there. I said, I'm going to go and talk to voters in battleground states. And I did. It was not curated. I went up to people just doing man on the street. I said, who are you going to vote for? Black men. And time after time after time, they said, I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Why?
Now, their reasons, why? They said, because most of the time they said, well, you know, for economic reasons, right? Or because
That's a great
he
answer.
gave me a stimulus check.
Okay, well, let me pause on first. Economic reasons. That's a fantastic answer. That's a fantastic answer because reality reflects that judgment. Your economic situation, regardless of your skin color, on a broad societal level, and of course, there's individual cases where it's not going to be the case, but the trends are obvious. People are better off under Trump than they are under Biden-Harris. It's obviously true. People are now poorer than they were when Joe Biden took office. That can't even be contested. Credit card debt is at a record level. Native-born Americans are losing jobs in this market. To the extent that people have jobs, people are working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet, just to feed their families. So those men, regardless of skin color, who say, yeah, I was better off under Trump, are right. And now we've got this great comparison. You can see, what was it like under the Trump presidency? What is it like under the Biden-Harris presidency? It's not often in American politics you even have the ability to look at the real-world impact of what each of the candidates represent. But here we do. And that comparison is very easy to make. Oh, yeah, Trump, much better.
They said, I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Why?
Now, their reasons, why? They said, because most of the time they said, well, you know, for economic reasons, right? Or because he gave me a stimulus check. And I had to correct them over and over and tell them where that stimulus check came from a Democratic Congress and from Nancy Pelosi. And that Donald Trump actually held the check up so that his name could be put on the check. So they think they got the check directly from him.
Who I don't know if Don's familiar with the Constitution. Who signs these things into law? Who's that final person who does that? Little quiz for you. I think that's the President of the United States.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden has given 1 or 2 stimulus checks as well, but they seem not to know and understand that. You can vote for whoever you want to vote.
Which drove up the cost of living in the entire country. So what Don Lemon just elided past was that Joe Biden dramatically made inflation worse in the United States. The reason that we are all poorer now is thanks to what Don Lemon said that black men should be crediting Joe Biden for.
But the reasons that you're going to vote for them, I think that they should be accurate and factual, and you should know why you're supporting someone.
So the last person they want to talk to then is Don Lemon. That's not going to help It's not going to help them navigate towards accurate and factual. Over on MSNBC, Joy Reid is so angry about how the election is going. She's now accusing black and brown men of being fascists.
And in many ways, the disinformation campaign is working. Base Republicans today believe everything from Democrats secretly manipulating the weather from a secret base in Alaska.
Well, no, actually, Democrats don't try and secretly manipulate the weather. Democrats have a very open policy of we will manipulate the weather if you give us more power. That's the whole climate change agenda. We can change the weather if you give us everything you own. If you do that, and if you stay locked inside of some high-density building that we put you in, if you don't take your gas SUV out to go see your kids play soccer or anything else, if you just trust us to manage your entire life, we can control the weather. That is actually the Democrat Party pitch. That's the claim they keep making. Joy Reid says it's crazy that they think Democrats would try to control the weather. Yes, literally, that's your policy.
The weather from a secret base in Alaska to Trump being incapable of losing this election. He's winning in a landslide. And some Democrats are starting to believe the disinformation, too.
She sounds pretty relaxed, doesn't she? She knows Kamala's going to win this thing. You can tell based on the tone of her voice. Everything's going great for her.
Have you noticed how sharply the polls have shifted in Trump's favor over the last couple weeks? With these claims that Trump is surging with black and Latino voters.
Wait a second. Is she doing the View thing? Is that what I'm listening to? So the polls are a hoax designed to help Donald Trump win. This is the kind of conspiracy theorizing going on right now. The polls, which notoriously undercount Republican support, and I'm not basing that on, just like, from a hunch. No, in each subsequent election, the polls have failed to capture and then subsequently tell you about the extent of Republican support for Donald Trump. That's just true. That's obvious. You look at the surveys, go to the Real Clear Politics website. You can look at the polls from the 2016 election, from the 2020 election, and then you can look at the actual vote tallies. You can compare the two. So the polls underappreciate Trump support for any number of reasons. And here you have Joy Reid saying, actually, the polls are rigged to make it seem like Trump is doing better than he actually is. That's what she's saying.
And leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite
from the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign released its internals showing them doing well in all the swing states.
All the Hitler talk. Yes, this race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear.
Yes, it's those whites, those evil whites, says the racist lady on MSNBC.
But in small pockets among black and brown men, too. This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent. And
so you see what she's doing, this little game she's playing? So the racial identity politics on which she's so reliant are now breaking down, and she doesn't really know how to manage it. So she's shifting to a different form of bigoted identity politics, which is now she's attacking men as being sexist. So because black and brown men are succumbing to fascism in her telling, fascism, of course, led by the white man, the evil white man. So now she has to resort to, well, it's because they're all men and they hate women. This is the kind of destructive, poisonous political analysis that MSNBC pays millions, right? Millions per year to her. You think she makes millions? She's got to make millions to do this.
Seek positions of power. But friend of the show, Simon Rosenberg, points out that just like in 2020 and 2022, dozens of right-wing polls have been dumped into the marketplace in the last few weeks, 12 in Pennsylvania alone. Those polls then swing the polling averages to the right, making Trump look strong.
Now, there are a lot of polling aggregators which exclude these types of partisan affiliated polling firms. She's just making something up for her audience right now to try and soothe their nerves, which are immense at the moment.
And Kamala Harris looks stalled. Now, there are lots of explanations for why you'd want to game the polls. Entrepreneurial Republican pollsters can certainly gain favor with Trump, who's apparently fuming about Vice President Harris's billion-dollar fundraising and positive press.
Have you noticed that one of the features of this segment, we've been playing all these lefties accusing Trump of being a fascist, which, again, the Mussolini definition is the merger of the state and corporate. And How did Kamala Harris raise $1 billion in 3 months? How'd that happen? You think that was a bunch of mom and pops? That was grandma opening up her coin purse and slipping a couple of quarters into the Kamala machine? I don't think so. I don't think that's how that happened.
And then there's the more sinister explanation.
Oh, yeah, give it to me, baby.
That if Trump, Republican pollsters, and even jittery Democrats convince enough people that his victory is inevitable, how much easier would it be to claim that the election was stolen if he loses? And how much easier would it be to get his base to rise up and maybe even get violent the way they did when he lost the last time? How much easier would it be?
You know, when Trump won in 2016, does anybody remember what happened on Inauguration Day after that? Is there any space in your mind for that occurrence? The media memory hold it about as quickly as they could any issue whatsoever. Do you remember the riots in D.C., the smashing of small businesses that was going on in the nation's capital, the burning of a limousine, a guy's entire livelihood burned to the ground right in front of the Washington Post building? You can't put a story more neatly in front of a news organization than burning the vehicle in front of the Washington Post. There's no travel expenses to get to that story. You don't have to work up a budget. You literally just walk your fat rear end outside and you stare at it, take a picture with your iPhone, and then you share it with your audience. The riots were out of control, and that was just the beginning of the chaos. We've seen left-wing destruction to the tune of way too many lives and way too much money all across this country, fired up by an out-of-control left-wing political machine, which really blew up into an utter disaster in the summer of 2020. Just unbelievable, the extent to which the left went. And here she is being like, we'd hate to see some violence. I got to be honest, I'm nervous about what happens if Trump wins. I want Trump to win. I'm not so nervous as that I don't want him to win. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just nervous about how chaotic and out of control the left is. They've already tried to kill him twice this cycle. There's already been 2 attempts on his life. And at least one of the shooters was explicit about his motivations. He said democracy is on the ballot. He was repeating White House talking points as he undertook an assassination attempt of Donald Trump. So do people who support Trump and a stable country have any reason to be nervous about a Trump victory? Yeah. It's because the left is out of control. And so we have a right to be nervous about that. Coming up, we're going to talk to John Lott. He's got the details on crime in America. The government's lying, and the media is carrying their water. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Mary Rook from the Daily Caller joins us. We'll talk about President Trump's town hall with women and how the president can win over those female voters all across the country. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Do you remember this moment from that ABC debate as David Muir jumped in to lie to the American people?
And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
A good fact check by President Trump. He was right about that. But we keep finding out more and more information about just how bad things actually are in the country. And for that, we turn to the expert on the data, John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and the author of Gun Control Myths, joins us now. John, as always, good to have you back with us.
Oh, it's great to talk to you, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
You've got a piece today in Real Clear Investigations. The headline, Stealth Edit, FBI quietly revises violent crime stats. What are we learning?
Right. Well, just as an aside first, when President Trump was referring to the huge increase in violent crime, he was referring to the data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which looks at total crime. And during the Biden administration, total violent crimes increased 55% in 3 years. That's the largest increase over any 3-year period since they started collecting the data 51 years ago. In fact, it's more than twice as large is the largest previous increase, with rape up 42%, robberies up 63%, aggravated assaults up 55%. But what the media has generally focused on is just the FBI data, which looks at just a part of crime. It looks at crimes reported to police. And the numbers that David Muir had and were basically the 22 data was the last year that was available. The 2023 data didn't come out until September. And when the 2022 data was released, and it showed a 2.1% drop in violent crime. And only now, when they did the update, and that was supposed to be the final data for that, but when they did the update, when they came out with the 2023 data last month, they quietly, with no fanfare, with no mention in their press release or the report, had increased that 2022 data from a drop of 2.1% to an increase of 4.5%. In fact, there's only one sentence in their report for 2023 and one footnote that just quietly mentions that they updated the data for 2022 with no mention that it completely changed it from a drop to an increase.
So they only declare in this recent update that was done in September, they only say, by the way, we updated the 2022 data, and that's all they say. But then you clicked in, you actually started digging into the actual data, and you found out, whoa, wait a second, they revised that crime data upward.
Right. Well, yeah, I didn't even, the footnote, I didn't even notice until I'd actually found that there was an increase. Kind of the nerd that I am, I download each year their file on the crime data, and I was noticing that there was a difference. That the data, their file this year didn't match the file from what they put out last year, and it was pretty clear that there had been a significant increase. I mean, just give people an idea. Percentages might be a little bit mind-numbing, but what they missed essentially was 80,000, slightly over 80,000 violent crimes. They were off by 1,699 murders. They were off by over 10,000 rapes. They were off by 33,000 robberies. They were off by 37,000 aggravated assaults. And they were off by 198,000 property crimes. So, you know, those are a lot of things to be off by. And I've reached out over the last several weeks to the FBI to try to get an answer for why they made the changes in the earlier data. Over the last couple of days, I've tried much harder to reach out to them. And, you know, and they won't respond to it, which isn't particularly surprising. I've dealt with the FBI data people many times over the years, and when I worked in the Department of Justice, so that may not be anything new. But they don't, you know, you'd like to have some explanation for why they made such large changes, why they missed these large changes that are there. You know, one thing, just to back up, people think that all the FBI does is simply count the crimes that are reported to them, and that's not what they do. There's some of that, a lot of that, but then they also go and put in estimates. So you have some cities that only partly report crime for part of the year, and then they have to guess what they think it is for the rest of the year after that.
Right.
And then there are other cities that don't report any data at all, and then they have to guess for those things, and they have estimates. It's kind of a black box, particularly on the places that are completely missing. They never explain how they did that, and obviously they decided that they had to go back and revisit their estimates that were there. But I was talking to a past head for the Bureau of Justice Statistics yesterday, and I was asking him, I said, look, if you had put out a report, because they also put out crime data, and it had gone from a drop to an increase, this big of a change, wouldn't you have mentioned that in the press release where you were talking about the new data? And he said, yeah. And also, if it had been, he would have mentioned it in their report, too. The fact that the FBI, now maybe they're just embarrassed that they made the mistakes, or maybe they're trying to hide it. You know, I have no idea. I can't get into their minds about why they're doing the stuff that they're doing. But you would think that this, you know, we've had a whole year where the media has been having headline after headline based on these 2022 data, saying that crime's falling, but people mistakenly think that it's increasing. So even if you want to just use reported crimes, and you and I have talked multiple times about why that can be misleading
Yes.
and why you want to look at total crimes rather than report. But even if you agree with the media that you just want to look at the number of reported crimes, you know, all these headlines that we've seen over the last year are wrong even by that measure.
Right. In other words, crime has risen dramatically under President Biden. And when you mentioned before that one of the holdups with the FBI data is it's only crimes that are reported to police. But there's one other element, of course. It's only crimes that police departments report to the FBI. And as President Trump mentioned in that audio, there are a number of major police departments in our country who have not been providing data to the FBI lately, right?
Yeah, well, particularly in 2021, you had a huge number of police departments. You know, you had in 2021, you had New York, Los Angeles, Chicago that didn't report any crime data to the FBI. You had Phoenix that only reported it for a part of the year to the FBI. So you had 4 of the 5 largest cities in the country, which either didn't report crime data at all or only partially reported data.
Yeah, and so that leads to where we are now. You mentioned at the top that there's a difference between the data in terms of what the FBI shares, but and what's called the National Crime Victimization Survey. That's where it's a survey, as I understand it, as you've told me before, where people talk about the ways in which they've been victimized. Those numbers are up dramatically, right?
Yeah, no, for 51 years, we've had this survey. And the reason why we have the survey, which is a truly massive survey, they survey 240,000 people each year. I mean, you know, in politics, they think a big survey is 8,000 people or 10,000 people. And here they do 240,000 people. And the reason why they did this, and they started this over 50 years ago, is because we know most crimes aren't reported to the police. And the only way we know that is by going out and asking people whether they've been victims of crimes. But they just don't take people's word on this stuff when they call them up. They ask them a long series of questions about the characteristics of the criminal, where it occurred, when it occurred, what it involved. And then finally, at the end, they ask people whether or not they reported the crime or not to the police. But you find that about 45% of violent crimes are reported to police. Only about 30% of property crimes are reported to police. And those numbers can change over time. One of the reasons why they change, one of the big reasons they change, is whether or not people think that the crimes are going to be solved and whether the criminal is going to be punished. If you don't think criminals are going to be caught and punished, and we've seen over the last few years a huge drop in arrest rates. If you look at the 5 years before COVID for large cities, 44% of violent crimes result in arrest. By 2022, it was down to 20% of reported violent crimes result in arrest, and only 4.5% of reported property crimes resulted in arrest.
4.5%?
4.5, right.
So, I mean, and I've, you know, and it makes sense to me because if you're in a neighborhood, say, where, you know, bikes are being stolen or something, and you become accustomed to the fact, like, don't bother calling the cops. It's not like they're going to spend any resources on it. They're stretched too thin. They're not going to be able to track down who stole your bicycle. So word begins to get around and people are like, well, no reason to call. I just guess I lost a bike.
Right. No, exactly. And the thing is, it's gotten worse over time. So, like, if you call up 911 in many parts of this country, one of the things that the operator is going to ask you is the criminal there still committing the crime? And if you tell them no, what they'll tell you these days is that, well, you can come down to the police station, you can wait in line, and we'll have a police report filled out for you. And, you know, you may also get the impression that it's unlikely that anything's going to happen. And so what's happened is that, you know, a few years ago, they would have sent out a police car to where the crime occurred and taken the report. But now they're making it more costly, more difficult, more time-consuming for people to go and do it. So there's some people who previously would have reported a crime to the police who are now going to say, you know, it's just not worth it doing it.
Yeah, and the government's throwing up impediments in your way to get to the bottom of it. It's really outrageous. So I shared some of the data today from your Real Clear Investigations piece online. What really stood out to me are the numbers that you shared at the top of our conversation, John. The data that shows from the National Crime Victimization Survey that in the United States, under Joe Biden, rapes are up 42%, robbery is up 63%, and aggravated assault is up 55%. And as you pointed out, that's the largest percentage increase over any 3-year period in the data that's ever been recorded. That's a massive number, and it flies directly in the face of those thousands of media headlines that you've been calling out as lies for some time.
But, the National Crime Victimization came out with its annual report in September. You got crickets from the media. You would think there's this big increase in crime that's occurred during the Biden administration. The New York Post ran a story, the Washington Times ran a story, Fox News ran a story. But outside of them, and maybe the Washington Examiner, I can't remember, also had a story on it. But outside of kind of a small clique of conservative media, it was not mentioned at all. And you would think that it's at least something of a news story to say that total crime has soared like that. Under Trump, it fell by 15%. So it falls by 15% under Trump, and then you have this 55% increase in total violent crime during the Biden administration. And the fact that they just would hang on so vociferously to just the data that they thought, moved in the direction that they wanted. But now when it turns out even that data that they've been pushing for the last year doesn't even show the drop that they've been telling people. I've gone and I've talked to reporters, I've gone to the media trying to get them to write stories on this, and it's just been impossible. That's the reason why I end up writing the piece for Real Clear Investigations. But the data's there.
Yeah.
People can check it themselves.
John, finally, what kind of reaction have you received from this piece today? You often write pieces like this, which are so helpful to our understanding of what's actually going on in the country. What kind of reaction have you received? Have you received any legacy media requests for comment? Are they trying to knock this down at all?
No, I haven't gotten anybody to knock it down. I will say I reached out to Glenn Kessler at the Washington Post, who I've had connection with over the years. And Glenn said, great job, John, exclamation point, and said that he had flagged it for his editors there to go and do a story on it. But I haven't heard any follow-up on it from that. I know Fox just came out with a story this afternoon on it, and I believe the Washington Times is going to be coming out with a story on it. But no. But my guess is, maybe Brett Baer will ask about it tonight. He retweeted the Real Clear Investigations article. And, maybe he'll ask Kamala Harris, and that would make it a news item that maybe the rest of the media would have to deal with. Then.
Yeah, we'll find out in the next hour or so if that's the case. In Glenn Kessler's case, isn't he the fact checker at the Washington Post? Why wouldn't he write it?
I don't know, because I don't know. You have to ask Glenn. I'm just telling you what he did.
Okay.
He my guess is he thought this was enough of a news article per se, rather that they should handle it as a news article. Okay. And there've been plenty of regular news articles in the Washington Post over the last year about crime falling.
Got it. Well, I'm eagerly awaiting the Washington Post's A1 coverage of this important story. Thank you very much. As always, John Lott, good to talk to you today.
Thanks. People can find more at our website at crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. But thank you very much.
Crimeresearch.org. Yeah, don't rely on Pennsylvania for the outcome. That's the annoying thing. What I want Trump to do is win Wisconsin and Michigan. We can all go to bed, And Virginia, yes, that's exactly right. If he wins Virginia, it's game, set, match, as they say. Hey, coming up in the effort to win this election, you got to appeal to all sorts of voters, including women. Women vote. Did you know about this? It's this hot new trend. Mary Rook is going to talk to us about the female vote, where it's headed. President Trump just completed a big town hall with women in Georgia. We'll get Mary's reaction and what's ahead in this election. Stay with us right here on WMAL.